So the grooming gang report finally got released after waiting God knows how long. Apparently it's now in the public interest, so they've given the peasants the report. I provided a Google Drive link, which I hope one of you can put in the chat, because we're not hacks. The Guardian's released pieces on this, and they just don't provide a link, because you can't.
We can
read
put
it
a link
yourself.
in the description.
Yeah, but I want people to also have it, just so we make the point. So the Guardian have instantly come out with their report, or their summation of the report, and as you can see by the headline there, most child sexual abuse gangs made up of white men, Home Office report says.
Well, I can see why now it's in the public interest to release it.
So
if that's the narrative that they can go with, then it's safe.
We'll get into that. So they say in the article, most child sexual abuse gangs are made up of white men. Home Office report says, and it says the following: researchers found that group-based child sexual exploitation offenders are most commonly white. Some studies suggest an overrepresentation of black and Asian offenders related to the demographics of national populations. And they then take a quote from Nazia Afzal saying that it confirms that white men remain most common offenders, which is something rarely mentioned by right-wing commentators. However, it is not shy in reflecting the South Asian and British Pakistani men are disproportionately found in high-profile cases. You'll notice they put that part right at the end of the article.
But that's the important part.
That's because that's the thing. The obvious point they're trying to make here is most of them are white, so there is no story. And
2% of the population are massively disproportionately
We'll get into it, because this instantly started trending on Twitter, if we can get the low-res image. Sorry, guys. So this name started trending, God knows why. So let's go to the first tweet. And the first tweet that was the top of the pile of this was from Peter Jukes, who works for the Byline Times, a far-left rag that just writes nonsense. And he says, bang goes the repulsive calamity that has powered so much Islamophobia. One question, Peter. Where does it mention Islam in the report?
That's a good question. Because it doesn't.
Let's go to the next tweet.
That's actually...
We'll get to it.
Oh, okay.
Hold it.
So, shut up.
This chap, can't pronounce the name because it's difficult. He works for the Muslim Council of Britain. He's a spokesman for them. He's written a lot of nonsense and given a lot of nonsense in the past. And again, what would you call it? Promoting the...
narrative?
The singular sentence that researchers found that group-based child sexual exploitation offenders are commonly white. Okay. So what? Because there's the point. Most commonly, or majority, what does that mean? 51%.
Yeah.
What percentage of Britain is white?
Well, according to the last census, it was 87%, but I imagine it's going to be about 80% now.
But it won't be 51.
No.
So the question is it under or overrepresented, obviously?
Well, I mean, Muslims in Britain are something like 4% of the population, 5% of the population.
That's another point. Because the
Muslim men are 2.5%.
Ethnicity and religion are not the same thing. And as I mentioned earlier about the guy talking about Islamophobia, well, where does it mention Islam, my friend? Why is the Muslim Council of Britain spokesman talking about this?
Why do you all feel so personally attacked?
So let's go to image 2. So if you look up Islam in the report itself, you only get one reference. There you go.
And it's not even about Islam. It's about Islamophobia, exploiting concerns about Asian groom gas to fuel Islamophobia by the Huffington Post in 2013.
So that's in the reference section talking about where they get their stories.
At no point in the thing does it mention Islam or Muslims, right?
It does mention Muslims, but when you look up Muslim, you get references to the fact that it's bigotry or Muslim girls were also groomed. You do not get a reference to the percentage of Muslims who were groomers. And this is a report looking at the characteristics of groomers. And you remember a lot of the accusation, particularly why is Peter Jukes mentioning Islamophobia, is because this is disproportionate among Muslim communities.
Yep.
But of course, this has been substituted. Instead, we're using ethnicity, which is not a great turnover, but okay, fine.
It's not in any way useful.
This is not one of the questions that was asked. But, I mean, people were asking about ethnicity, so at least they went over that.
Okay.
And so I wanted to get this up. So because the claims are from people like the name that I don't think we can mention without setting up a bot, is that are Asians disproportionately engaging in this? If they are, by how much? Because if it's by 100%, 200%, if it's only 51% of offenders are white males and it's 40% Asian and then the rest of others, that would be a 1,000% overrepresentation or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's the question. How bad is it? And then, of course, the question from people like Mr. So-and-so is that are Muslims disproportionately represented? And if so, do they use religion to justify their claims? And did the police act out of fear of political correctness? Those are the three questions everyone wanted from this report to look at.
And I just want to be clear, the Alexis J report from 2014 from Rotherham, these are all things that she assessed.
And she did. And she came to the politically incorrect conclusions.
Yeah. And is it correct? I recall reading that they had a weird way of targeting where they were going to investigate this.
Well, we'll get into it.
Right.
Sorry. No.
I don't mean to jump
shutting
ahead.
you down.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So let's just get to the claim that the Guardian took. So they just took the section that mostly white men are the perpetrators, which is lazy journalism at its finest. So if we can put this on screen so people can read it. This is the section of the report talking about that, the 3 bullet points of what's going on there. So firstly, just complaining that the data is bad because of different reasons. They label all the reasons. I'm not going to go through them. Who cares? You can read it in your own time. But that if there is a cultural significance, you shouldn't ignore it because, of course, that's a way of intervening. Then you know what you're looking for. So then the second bullet point is where the Guardian draws their info. A number of studies have indicated that an overrepresentation of Asian and black offenders in group-based CSE. Most of the same studies show that the majority of offenders are white. Fine. Because that's not the question. The question is it disproportionate?
Yeah.
Like, sure, there have been people like William did their study. They only used the data that was publicly available, so it's not even a slight on them.
No.
Like, they got police data because it's the Home Office. Quilliam doesn't have that. So they got 87% or whatever it was, 82.
Yeah.
And, okay, yeah, that disproves that is what it is if this data is correct. Fine, but that doesn't prove the point wrong, which is this disproportionate?
Yeah.
And I was expecting some Excel spreadsheets and some pie graphs to show the makeup. Of course, there's nothing like that.
Yeah.
What was I expecting?
But I mean, in a country with let's just go for 80% white British, and then 4 to 5% Muslim. I mean, if it wasn't that the majority of child sexual exploitation was done by white British people, I mean, that would just be mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You can't even imagine a scenario where that's the case.
So the data itself, and this is, we'll get into some of the complaints about it, but the data they do use, they list A through E, a bunch of studies. And the problem with most of these studies is they get their data set, and about 30 to 40% of the data they do have, they have to disregard because it's either not recorded properly or it's just not recorded at all. So that people didn't put ethnicity for each of the offenders. So the first one shows that 30% of offenders are white, while 28% were Asian. This is listed by the Home Office.
This is not proportional to the number of white people to Asian people in the country.
Let me finish and then you'll...
Sorry. I'm
going to keep shutting you down.
No, you do feel free.
Yeah, B. So the other study they use here, where data was available, white was the largest category. C. Half of the groups consisted of all Asian offenders, 11 were all white, 4 were all black, and 2 were exclusively Arab. Looking at the offenders across all groups, of the 306 offenders, 75% were Asian. Study number 4. This study found that 42% were white or white British, 17% were black or black British, 14% were Asian or Asian British, and 4% had another ethnicity. E. From the minority ethnic backgrounds, those of a minority ethnic background who were overrepresented compared to the local area, meaning that the ethnic minorities were overrepresented, but they don't give you a breakdown of which one. All of those non-proportionate. And that's the studies the Home Office said they used to come to this conclusion.
So, yeah, I mean, so what was the first one? It was 48% or...
The first one said 30% were white, 28% were Asian.
Right, that's staggering.
That's not a bombshell, is it? That's
a bombshell. That's
not
massive.
worth the Guardian reporting, apparently.
That's massive because I mean, the country is not 30% white, right? The country is 80% white, and so like the the country is like 4 or 5% Muslim or Asian, and I mean that is staggering. That is absolutely staggeringly disproportionate. To then go, well, the majority of it was done by white people. Doesn't tell the story.
But that's the thing. They're not just relying on one study. They have to rely on a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And they get into one of the problems they have. So I assume they just have more data that they haven't listed.
Right.
Because, I mean, they are the Home Office. They should be able to get access to every piece of governmental information.
Yeah.
But they write this conclusion in paragraph 81. You can read it for yourselves along if you've got it. Based on the existing evidence and our understanding of the flaws in the existing data, so already couching it in, it seems most likely that the ethnicity of the group-based CSE offenders is in line with CSA more generally and with the general population, with the majority of offenders being white.
That's not in line with the general population at all.
Majority, again, we don't know. That's not a figure. That's not a pie graph telling me how much. It's just a majority. And then you notice the rest of that sentence, like based on the existing evidence with the flaws in the existing data, seems most likely probably in line with CSA. It's very couched in, and we're not sure.
Layer upon layer of caveat.
Which is why I'm not actually angry at this report too much, because it seems like the Home Office is saying, we're not really sure, to be perfectly honest. We've got this academic data, and then we've got our sources, but the problem they have, and they have a legitimate problem here, is that a lot of the times police officers don't record it, or they record it incorrectly, and they're just sort of like...
Because of the political correctness pressures that Alexis J identified. Yeah. Now, was it correct or not that they ignored Telford...
We'll get to it.
Oh, sorry.
Gotta get...
no, fine, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So the obvious point you were about to make, and we're doing it now, is that they didn't include different pieces of information that you would include if you wanted to do this. And the first one here we reported on a while back. You can go back and check this video out from us exclusively. I don't think anyone else talked about it.
Yep.
I think maybe we got a problem and some other alternative creators, but no mainstream media.
Yeah.
The thing here was that they're not including operations that are in some of the areas you'd expect them to. So at the ends, they have a list of annexes, and one of them's about all the operations they're using, some in Bristol, some places like that. And, of course, the problem there is they're not including places like Rotherham. They're not including the operations in Rochdale.
Telford.
Yeah.
Like where I mean, that's where you can see the all of these people are people who have been convicted of being in grooming gangs.
We'll do that in a minute, don't worry.
But the point is... Sorry.
So, I wanted to play a video from Lord Pearson's personal assistant, Peter McAvenna, just to make this point even more stark. If you can play this one, please.
Lord Pearson, Lord Singh have asked about this report, and they have asked whether religion will be taken into account, ethnicity will be taken into account. They have asked the government when it will be published, and they have asked the government who's on this expert committee, which advises the government. I just looked through the expert committee at the end. You don't have people like Jane Senior, who broke the story initially with Andrew Norfolk on the Daily, on the Times from page 2012. You don't have other champions like Maggie Oliver, who was the whistleblower. So together, Jane Senior and Maggie Oliver have done more than really anyone else to expose this to the public. Peter McLaughlin wrote Easy Meat, which I don't have here, and that was the first comprehensive book looking at all the cases which had happened on grooming gangs. And here we have, is this coming up? So this is Peter McLaughlin, and it's pmclauth.com. I put it in the description so you can get it there. Statistics on grooming gangs jailed. And he goes through, as you see, all the cases, all of them, all the way back, we'll scroll all the way down to the first case was 1997 in Leeds.
So that's just Peter making the point that the kind of people you would expect to be on this report, Maggie Oliver, Jane Senior, and Peter McLaughlin, people who've done massive amounts of work on this. None of them are included. You remember we spoke about Maggie Oliver. She said 50% of the information she'd sent to them, they just deleted. They just weren't interested in the witness statements. Not part of this report.
Mad.
And, okay, what's the reasonable argument for that? Now, they're arguing in the report that there are certain sources which are biased, and therefore we're not going to include them, and we don't think they're credible. And they make a reference to Quilliam, and they say, Quilliam's source, we think it's... If either, I don't have the full text, but you can go look up Quilliam in there and you'll find that.
Presumably a hotbed of right-wing radicalism.
Yeah, I guess so. But they therefore say, well, don't want to use that. And I'm guessing they would argue the same. Maggie Oliver's biased, even though she was a detective working on these cases for God knows how many years. And then an activist for these girls' rights. Not politically biased, but just biased, I guess. Jane Senior, someone who's talked about this a lot, done a lot of work on it with Andrew Norfolk. No, you're not her. And then Peter McLaughlin, I can see the argument, like he has worked with the man we shall not name and produced books about Islam, therefore he's haram and cannot be included. But I mean, his data list there, what's wrong about that? All of those are publicly convicted people. Like, you can get the information anywhere, and the Home Office will have that information.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they couldn't talk to him.
Why would you leave out, like, 4 or 5 cities where this thing came to light because of how bad it was and how obviously ethnically targeted it was?
Who knows?
Why would you leave that out?
So, okay, you want to argue these people are politically biased or biased in some way, therefore we won't include... Fine. Okay, then why did you include this lady? So this is Ella Cockbain, And she's produced, as you can see there, they're regarding on academic evidence, and this is a bunch of different studies she's written. And one of the things they didn't include is one of her other studies. This is why I'm semi-familiar with her, is, okay, maybe she's trustworthy, but I personally do not trust this lady to produce unbiased results. I trust her as much as I trust Peter McLaughlin. So I don't understand why she's included. And just to give an example, I don't know if you can get the journal up, the second link. She issued she co-wrote a paper talking about why this was going on. And her central argument comes down to, well, if we aggregate child sexual abuse to be all of it, because grooming doesn't really mean anything, therefore the majority of people are white, therefore there's not an issue and everyone's overblowing this.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is just a nonsense argument.
Well, it's just categorization adjustment. Well, it doesn't change the number of girls who have been groomed, girls have been raped, whose lives have been ruined, and it doesn't change who's doing it. It doesn't change who's being convicted for it, because we've got all the names of the people who have been convicted. Not many of them are traditional British names. Not many John Smiths.
Some of the other comments in here are just weird. Like, she asserts that Andrew Norfolk is basically dishonest and lying. Jack Straw is lying. Sarah Champion is alleged to be...
a Nazi.
A far right is the...
There we go.
So she's saying that...
Labour MP for Rotherham.
Her comments were parroted as being part of the far right or something. You'd have to get in there. Savage Javid is lying. Also,
how far does this far right conspiracy go?
They also refer to Priti Patel as a racial gatekeeper. So it's like, look, okay.
That's literally Navara Media's perspective on Priti Patel.
Fine. Maybe your research has some data, but you are very clearly a biased individual. And that's to be expected. All of academia is just as biased as real life. They try and minimize it, but I don't limit your sources to academic sources.
Yeah.
They have their problems too.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, why is she being allowed to be quoted a million times? But Peter McLaughlin, Maggie Oliver, Jane Senior, they're not in. I don't see the rationale. And, of course, the point you had just made and you were going to make is image number 5. Now, this is an image which was compiled by the man we cannot name, who all he did was looked up every single case he knew about, looked up a news report, and got images of the people who were now convicted. Because you don't get images before they're convicted. These people are all convicted. And he put them all together. And that's an image of everyone he could find was convicted.
Are we allowed to comment on that?
What do all these Mohammeds have in common?
Yes.
No, that's being a bit rude. But it's you can say it's a diverse group. You can see there's a Sikh guy, you can see there are white people, you can see there
I can see 2 white people at the top there.
All sorts of different kinds of people, and I understand that's a factual statement. But disproportionality is
2
also
white women down there.
Yep. What's disproportionate about this
4,
image? Is this a accurate makeup of
5,
of the cross section
6.
of Britain?
I can see 6.
You're at 6.
I'm at 7, I think, down there. There's one down there.
Some of these people may have been on holiday a long time.
Yeah, maybe. But 7 people who I would look at and judge to be ethnically white British.
Yeah. And I'm not saying this is a full data set. Of course it's not. The Home Office will have the data that wasn't covered in the news.
These are just all of the people that have been convicted.
This is just the one that any member of the public can find.
Yeah.
This is why people are suspicious. The fact that you say yourselves that your data that you've got, you don't really trust.
8. I found 8.
The fact that you're using biased researchers and then the public available data doesn't seem to show that. Okay, fine. But then that's why their conclusion I'm not really mad with, because they say, look, other data have found this. We're not really sure about our data, but we're guessing that the majority are white British. Okay, maybe. But that's 51% at minimum, to maximum, being 100 or 99. But that's why I hate what The Guardian produce and what the leftists on Twitter are talking about. Because, of course, they're taking this as a vindication of there's no problem.
Yeah, there's no problem. There's no problem. And it's like, okay, well, you just don't want to know.
Yeah.
You're burying your head in the sand.
I mean, these people have never wanted to know, so I'm not surprised.
Not.
But there's I've got some quotes here just to...
Yeah, go for it.
From the Home Office, just to make, double up the point that if you're not going to read it, don't worry. That's just... So they say, it's difficult to draw conclusions about the ethnicity of offenders as existing research is limited and the data collection is poor. That's Priti Patel's quote in the opening statement. Another part, research on offender ethnicity is limited and it tends to rely on poor quality data. Later on, they also say what research there is tends to rely on poor quality data. Later on, research to date has relied on poor quality data with a number of weaknesses. Now, okay, fine. If only there was someone in a position of power who could do something about this. Home Office. Who else are you expecting to fix this? Like, you're the ones in charge of this.
What I would like to know is, I would like to know the number of convicted groomers per 100,000 per population group. Per 100,000 white British people, how many of them are convicted of group child sexual exploitation?
Yeah.
And per 100,000 of the Asian or Muslim or whatever way you want to slice the demographics, I just want to know. And I think that will be the real litmus test. But I guess that we don't have those figures, do we?
So yeah, I mean, we're disappointed in this because you haven't given anyone a conclusive answer. So I'm not actually that.
But you have given the Guardian a narrative they can say actually it's
Well,
white men that are the problem.
The Guardian was always going to spin.
Yeah, of course they were, but just giving them ammunition to do it is a problem. Man.
Yeah, I mean, if they just said, well, actually, our data seems to be bad. We really wish we had better data or something, maybe. But I'm not personally that aggrieved by that. I forgot what I was going to say. I was going to say something else.
I think this is shocking.
But it's really interesting that, as we mentioned earlier, Islam is not mentioned because they go into the motives of the perpetrators and they go into sexual pleasure, maybe this, maybe that, domination, but they do not mention religious justifications or anything.
I mean, do they not speak to any of the victims who we have spoken to and who say, well, they give us religious reasons?
The only reference is into Muslim girls being groomed, at least I found, and they mention that Muslim groomers will use that as a means to keep them quiet, the fact that this will bring shame on your family because you're part of our community. And that's it. It's like, right, this is... Come on, you knew there were more stones to be unturned here, and you haven't unturned them.
Yeah.
Like, even if we just take it, okay, your racial data you think is suspect, or you're not ready to say something concrete. There's no pie graphs.
Yeah.
Fine. But then, Savage Jarvid's statement on it, what was it? There will be no stone unturned, political correctness will not stop us. Why did you not investigate?
Doesn't look like it. It looks like stones have been left unturned because of political correctness.
Why is Peter Jukes mentioning Islamophobia?
Yeah.
Because the accusation from a large part of people involved in this is that there was a religious motive.
Yeah. And not only that, recently, in fact it was last week, there was another gang convicted for historic offences, wasn't there? I can't remember where it was now, but it was the headlines just come past. Here's a new one.
Ongoing operations. This is one of the problems that the Home Office had, was we're trying to release a report on this, but we still have ongoing operations finding people constantly. This is just the state of the country.
The Guardian have indicated, it was mostly white men, therefore no problem at all.
Muslim Council of Britain, Guardian wrote up bylines. There's nothing going on, lads.